Many thanks for staying tuned. It's still the conversation here on Lagos Television. This morning on the program, we intend to take a look at multiple bank charges implication on customers. Now, the question that would readily be on the mind of every Nigerian is, should the customers be the ones, paying for keeping their monies in the bank, and should Nigerians be overtaxed when charges are involved? I'm sure that, of course, there are things that maybe as laymen we do not have an understanding of. But of course, we have a guest in the house this morning. He is a chartered accountant. Perhaps he'll be able to take us through why this is done. And as consumers, as customers, can we complain? And if we can, how do we channel our complaints? We're glad to have Mr. Kola Olaitan, a chartered accountant, in the studio this morning. Thank you for being here on the program.
My pleasure to be here. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning, viewers.
Right. So, of course, the general understanding is we do go to the banks. We keep our monies in the banks for safekeeping. And perhaps at the end of the year, we should also get some kind of, you're already laughing, like we should get some kind of compensation in terms of dividends or some kind of, as customers. But sometimes that's not the case. We're still talking about this before we went on the break, that, for example, my bank, every morning when I wake up, I get minimum 2 messages. One, some levy, 50 naira has been deducted from your account. Another 100 naira has been deducted from your account. And at the end of the month, I get an alert for SMS receiving. And you're wondering, if they remove this money from every customer, aren't the banks ripping off their customers? So what exactly is this all about? Are the banks, we know that the banks, yes, have some kind of rights, but take us through why it feels like in Nigeria, the customers get charged. I don't want to call it double taxation now because this is not taxes, but why are we at the brink of getting multiple charges from our banks?
Okay, once again, good morning, and it's a pleasure to be here. I want to say that first, you can't get a dividend from the bank because you are not a shareholder.
Okay.
You are a customer with them. It's more like what you're doing, they are to them, I like to say, and because we'll get into the issue of the regulatory end.
Okay.
What is allowed? What they do is keep your money for you, safekeeping, so to say. Even though out of the money you keep with them, they generate some things out of it, because when they loan your money out to people,
they get interest on it.
They get interest on it. But that is not the only thing, because they also have expenses. They have overheads. They have a lot of other charges that they also pay to be able to sustain themselves. But truth be told, I guess there has been a lot of laxity around here. And over time, you remember at a point in time, what we had was a COT-free account, but that again came back as a maintenance, monthly maintenance fee. How that came about, I do not know. Sometimes the other day when I was discussing with someone, I said, oh, maybe that was where the 753 houses came from.
Oh my God.
So, you see, the truth of the matter, and a lot of us have actually complained that, look, over the years, if you take a look at it, now talking about the regulatory end, is the fact that we have had MDs or former MDs of banks taking charge of our central bank. And what you have at the end of the day is that, look, they seem to protect the interest of the banks more than they protect the interest
of the
customers and even that of government too. Because at the end of the day, that is the environment where they came from. And you will be shocked and possibly surprised when they leave office. That is where they go back at the end of the day. They still have their investment there. So in most cases, that is what you get. It's quite unfortunate, but let me also be a bit fair to them. the fact that a lot of times I sit back here. Some of us have account offshore. And I tell myself, if I want to get another ATM card, I don't pay. If I want to get a token, I can get it 3 times a year. If it is lost, I'll get another one.
You don't pay for it.
And a lot of charges that you have around here is not there. But like I said, to be fair to them, a lot of things that they pay for here look like they have a branch, they run a generator, they run a lot of other things that they don't ordinarily pay for. I mean those banks outside the shore of this land that they don't pay for. So sometimes one need to be fair to them. But let me tell you this sincerely. Over time we discover that you probably discover that it is better for you to invest in most of these banks than invest in manufacturing environments. When people talk about the issue of rent-seeking businessmen, the banks are one of them. Because at the end of the day, without investing in anything, just collecting your money
is enough for them to have a turnover.
Is enough for them to be able to make so much money. And you look at their bottom line, it's quite ridiculous. That is where I thought we ought to have, rather than the thing growing.
We should actually.
Imagine the issue of the alert. Even though the issue of alert, maybe some people will take that as probably make some sense out of it, because look, you can avoid the SMS via the telephone. You can just take the phone. Yes, just email.
Okay.
So that you don't run through the issue of having to pay for SMS.
Right.
So if people will probably just migrate from that, tell the banks you have the liberty to say, sorry, please don't
send me
SMS.
Right.
I want only
emails.
And that's just it. So like I said, it's neither here nor there. And thank goodness, I think some banks are also waking up. I don't want to mention the name of some banks here in this country. You see, it didn't just start just few whatever ago. For the discerning minds, there are some banks. They are not doing the day-to-day business like some of those banks are doing. They have very select few of customers. They don't charge. They give you your ATM card, you don't charge. I will advise people to please explore
go to those
that.
banks.
You see, when this issue of telecom started, some of the telecommunication organizations were ripping us off,
right?
Charging per minute, and what you discover is that look, one company just came up and said per second, and everybody followed. So I guess Nigerians just need to start demanding some of these things. And when we talk about the issue of inclusion, financial inclusion, this is one thing I expect the government to please, particularly the regulatory body, CBN, should take seriously. No doubt we are being extorted. Because at the end of the day, if you look at the bottom line of most of those banks, they make more money than companies that are actually contributing seriously to the economy.
Okay. These multiple charges, like we have maintenance fees, stamp duty, and the rest of them, for a society that is trying to promote cashless economy, is it not going to be counterproductive at the end of the day? Because when you sum up these charges, it's going to discourage some people who are not even interested in banking their money. So is it not going to be counterproductive at the end of the day?
You see, at the end of the day, if you sit back and look at it, what it will cost you, this is being reasonable now, what it will cost you to transact business online, you probably will not, you will be surprised that it will cost you more. That's what I was trying to say. It will cost you more to start carrying cash up and down. And say, oh, sorry, I want to pay you cash, I want to send it to you. These days, if I want to move from Obafemi Awolowo or Ikeja there down to this place, probably to and fro will cost me about 1,000 naira. So if you take a look at that, but I could just sit down there and send it to you. Have you seen it? The only thing I expect is that, look, the CBN should be a little more serious, and customers should also demand a lot more. Because one of the problems I have with that is the effectiveness of some of these online transactions that we do. Because if you have just only 10,000 naira in your account, you could just transfer it, and the other person will tell you, I didn't
get it.
And the next thing is, you start going up and down to the banks to pick it up. So for financial inclusion, if you take a good look at it, no doubt about it, we are somehow better off. But we just need to demand a little more from CBN, not from the banks.
Right.
And the only way we can also demand from the banks is, look, pull out your money, move to other banks where I expect, except for this issue of what they do, that people say, this is what you must charge. That they do within the bankers committee. That, what I charge is what you charge.
So
but
it's
I'm
uniform.
sure it's uniform. But some of them are already kind of getting out of it. Because at the end of the day, if this competition is allowed, you discover that a lot of them will start charging less, or probably do away with all those things.
Right. So you let's now go to, because I know that in the course of answering this last question, you talked about what the CBN should do. And we do know that at least, if not on a yearly basis, the CBN also regularly tries as much as possible to oversee what the banks are doing. So, I mean, with the current trend of how much it is that, the banks are laying on the doorstep of the customers, would you say that there's adequate regulation or oversight from the CBN?
To my own mind, I don't think so. And I will tell you,
why.
I will be very, very blunt about this.
Okay.
Corruption seems to have eaten so deep into the fabric of this society, and CBN is not
left out.
So, I mentioned the issue of 753 houses earlier on. It's not. I want to believe that is also part of the problems, because look, all that the banks need do to check, because you ask yourself, when we had the COT-free regime, the banks were still making money. And they weren't doing it less. They have our money, and what they do is generate funds out of it. But at the end of the day, what you discover is that, look, rather than you getting better with them, it's getting worse.
Right.
The question I ask is, what for? So, and when you put your money there, if they give you interest, maybe they give you, just an example, 5%, and you have the gap. And when they want to lend your money to somebody else,
they get two digits.
They get 2 digits, exactly. So the question is, what is happening? And they make a lot of money. The other day when they were talking of the issue of SMS charges and so on and so forth, I said, look, for goodness sake, that should even be a way to encourage
your customers
to please do bank with us.
Okay.
Look, we are not going to charge you for this, we are not going to charge you for that, and then you get more customers.
But the reason they also gave is that the telecoms are also holding them by the jugular.
No, the telecoms will always collect their money.
Right, because it's a service.
It's a service. But it is not all those services that you get money out of. Like I just mentioned.
You can barter.
Oh, of course. No, not even barter. What I expect is that, look, when you put your money there,
they pay for it. The banks can do the payments, and then it's part of the service that you enjoy. Okay?
It's part of the service that you enjoy. Look, you discover that it's even more terrible now. And it's one thing I complained about, and I wonder if the CBN is doing anything about it. And that is the level of fraud you see in the banking system. Because a lot of our banks today, close to about 60 to 70% of the workers there are casuals, so to say,
contract staff.
it is one thing I have been bothered that NLC did not see anything wrong with, and a lot of, I will say it openly here, a lot of times you discover that the outsourcing companies are actually even owned
by
board members of the banks. And they are ripping us off. You imagine a guy who ordinarily graduated from the university, very sound, and that was why you had, when this issue of JAPA started, a lot of those boys left them and traveled abroad.
Right.
And we started having problems, and what they tell you
banks.
is, we are doing upgrade, we are doing upgrade.
Yes. They kept
So
crashing.
sad. Yes. And that's why I said, in most cases, what you have is the issue of when a former banker who used to be in the commercial bank move into the CBN, who he will want to protect the interests of those banks. The other side of it is the corruption side of it. That, Bama Binu, and they just take that, and then they can do and undo. So, you see, all these things, unfortunately, we do not have our interests being properly protected. That is where I hold the CBN seriously responsible. Look, you are told to send email to complaints.
CBN,
Look,
right.
At the end of the day, you get nothing out
tired.
of it. You get nothing out of it.
The CBN now as a regulator, if the CBN is going to protect our interests, what format is it supposed to take and how? That is one. Then I want us to be fair to these banks as well. There are instances that you cited, use of generator, cost of doing their business. Where are they supposed to get this money?
If not from the customers.
Maintain their business, and of course.
I've just told you now, the other banks outside the shore of this land, or some of those other banks that are also doing business here, that are not charging for ATM, charging for token, and this SMS and other things, they're generating their money from somewhere. So originally the banks, when you start such business, it is expected that certain costs will be incurred.
Sure.
Now, when you expect that, and you also look at the fact that what they pay to their workers now, peanuts.
Compared to what they used to have.
What they used to have. Look, years ago, one of the late Chief Adeosun, I was having a conversation with him, and he said, sorry, this is no longer banking. He died almost about 10 years ago now. You imagine when we had that discussion. So what I'm saying is this. What they are doing now is ripping us off. No doubt about that. I want to be very, very factual about that. But the fact is, they need someone to put them in check.
And if the CBN should be doing.
That is what CBN ought to be doing. But the question is, are they doing it?
So who else can put the CBN in check then?
Now this is one point. You now have consumer protection and all whatnot outside the CBN. I think maybe people will start resorting to that if that will work.
Right.
And then the other part of it is customers now
withdrawing their services.
Yes, exactly. Banks. Not going to them anymore. But unfortunately, it looks like we are all getting used to it. These days, if you check me at any point in time, you hardly will find up to 2,000 naira in my pocket.
Right, that's true.
Because in most cases, you find
transfer,
it a lot. Exactly. Look, I know very well that I can, even if I'm going to somewhere, I can always get cash anywhere. What is even more pathetic is the fact that you get onto the ATM.
There's no cash.
There's no cash.
Oh, there is a limit to what you can withdraw.
No, seriously, I think we've been taken for granted.
For too long.
Okay, so if the banks are taking us for granted, even when you go to all these POS operators, they also charge you.
Yes.
Is that as a result of what the banks are charging them?
Let me answer this, and I want to now get onto the normal Nigerian whatever. This is a country where we are all greedy, and I want to say that we're taking advantage of one another almost everywhere. And the question you ask yourself, is the government also not taking advantage of the people? So That is it. And the people you have there are human beings anyway. So it's everyone for himself,
God for us all. But God will not come down.
That's exactly
to
what
help
we
us
all say. Exactly. Yes. So you imagine people making this kind of money and going to church and paying tithes, or going to the mosque and paying for whatever, when you have extorted some people, or you make the money in such a very terrible way, and you start donating it and giving scholarships and all. Sometimes when I watch some of all these guys, I ask myself, what do they think they are doing? Who are they deceiving? So, but it's work with the financial sector, I must say, sincerely. And that's the truth. Look, no doubt they are expected to pay some charges which they ordinarily would not pay in a good environment. But look, what they do, what those other banks up there also pay, what they pay, maybe not in terms of overheads and all whatnot, they don't casualize the way we do here. That's number one. Number two, the level of penalties they pay over there. If the banks here
they will shut down.
They will shut down.
They will shut down. Let me ride on the question Jibola asked you earlier on, when he did say that agreed that these banks also need to maintain their own cost of services. But if you look at the way we get charged as consumers, would you say that the cost of these services are commensurate with what they are charging, or at the back of the banks, they are primarily for revenue basis?
Purely for revenue. Bottom line.
Bottom line. So,
because if you sit back and look at what they make at the end of the day, what they net, and like also the way they kind of almost like stifle life out of their staff.
Okay, and their staff.
You
the target that they give them.
The target that they give them and all whatnot. Look, for goodness sake, you probably will not ever want even your enemy to work there. Talk less of your child.
Right.
Or your what. So, to me, I think we have been taken for a ride, and I just hope that we always mention government, but yes, for goodness sake, we'll talk about the government, because look, the government need to call the regulatory authorities
to order.
When they are called to order, maybe they will take action. But the truth of the matter is that it's just like the downfalls we have on the road. I am told most of the time, if you make too much noise, they are owned by people that ordinarily will need to challenge them, and that answers the question.
So who is going to regulate what then? If the regulator has a stake in those banks, that is one. Then you complain about the quality of banking that we have these days. You cited what Chief Adeosu said 10 years ago.
10 years
Yes.
So banking then and now, what has changed?
The only thing that has changed is technology.
Is it not supposed to make it better?
Of course, it's supposed to make it better, but not, possibly a little more expensive, possibly. But it's what you have now. Get into the banks now. You no longer need, in those days, you have somebody who check your signature, searching for cards, and so on and so forth. All those things are no longer there.
They are automated.
I expect that things ought to be cheaper.
Right. So, I mean,
it is not.
When things, in your expectation for things to be cheaper, should this also reflect on the number of branches that the banks are also particular about having? And it also feels like sometimes they are also very particular about the structure. They all want to maintain big structures, whereas things can be done in smaller spaces, considering the environment that you are. So the banks themselves, do they need to start looking at cutting costs so as to not to at least put all the burdens on their customers?
You probably will make me say what I do not want to say here. No, on a very serious note,
Right.
Sometimes I ask myself, you go on
A particular
Obakran,
street,
for example,
yeah,
and you find about 3 branches of a particular bank. And the question you ask yourself is,
why are they doing
what
with
for?
3 branches?
What for? rather than encouraging, you are encouraged to make calls, not to come to the branches and so on
You
and
can
so
do your
forth. You can
transactions
do your
online.
transactions somewhere. But unfortunately, what you have are structures. That also goes into what happens in this land. Because in most cases, some people probably own those buildings. Who leases the building? Maybe the owner of the banks, and possibly end up leasing it to the bank, and the bank pays, and then you find them in places. There are some banks I'm not allowed to mention here that I have kind of fingered in this kind of whatever, that you ask yourself, why all these branches?
Right.
Why all these bogus
Buildings.
What are they doing with it? Oh, please go to the high street in London and you see where Barclays is and so on. And you hardly will believe that that is
The
where a
bank.
bank is.
Right.
Because it's just
an ordinary space.
building.
Right.
And they may not even be the one occupying the whole
The
building.
whole building, yeah.
So, unfortunately, here, you see even some banks that are struggling to survive. You find them having a very big edifice, a small branch, and the manager and the staff there are expected to be able to recover the cost.
Is this a
building.
Is this a competition?
But to me, I see them as being fraudulent. That is just for me.
Okay.
The other side of it is competition. But to be sincere with you, what I see there is more of fraud.
Okay. All right. So with what we have laid bare on the table this morning,
I hope I'm not confusing you.
Not at all.
No.
As long as our viewers are not confused.
So what would be the solution at the end of the day? Because
No, I'm
it
actually
appears
talking about
that-
you and the viewers.
It appears that the customers are helpless.
Somehow.
And the banks, they kept sucking us dry with different levies, with different charges. And things cannot continue this way. If indeed you want to encourage people to continue to bank.
You see, I said something earlier on.
Because, I'm sorry, sir, there's a particular bank now, all these charges have been removed. The name starts with S, but I won't mention the name.
I know that.
So if they can do that, why can't others?
Do it. I think that is one thing we, the consumers, should start craving for, fighting for, and do whatever is possible. The only problem is that, look, if you form a consumer group, they probably just pick the leaders and feed them with some things, and then they will keep quiet. You remember there used to be shareholders association in Nigeria.
Yeah.
At a point, they became two because of what was there. And that's the kind of a thing you have in this country, unfortunately for us. So that's the Nigerian part of it.
Okay.
So I guess with time, it may only take just a little while, but I can tell you, we'll probably get there. Then this type of sensitization is what we all should be doing.
Right.
Look, I want to believe that some people listening to us after this time out will start challenging their banks. Will want to kind of, just like the telecoms too. You ask yourself certain charges that you get and you wonder, am I really getting
Value for your money.
value for money? Exactly, that's the word. So
Right.
that's just
So from what you've just said now, it looks like the customers also need to start holding the banks by the jugular and start speaking out more.
Exactly.
But I'm going to go back to what you said earlier. The CBN remains the regulator.
Sure.
And the CBN remains the ones that the customers would need to report to, or lay any complaints at their doorstep. But if the CBN itself is not that accessible, because it could take you months before you can get back a feedback or a response if you send the CBN any mail, especially if you've been defrauded, or if your money has been deducted and the bank is not coming forth. So how much do we also need to hold the CBN to be accountable for? Because we cannot fight here without the CBN also coming to the aid of the customers to the banks.
Yes, sincerely yours, the CBN, they have, for each of those complaints that we talked about, they ordinarily, the kind of threat they have is that, look, when you send a message to CBN, if you are lucky, they pay for it sometimes, penalties.
Right.
That, look, they also have a kind of a deadline within which your complaint must be resolved. Mm-hmm. And if they don't, and they have to kind of get to it, they pay penalties. But how many of such do they pay penalties on?
Right.
And that is where there would not have been an exchange between the CBN, and when I say CBN, I mean the people in charge. Before that is done. This is an assumption anyway,
right.
Because I cannot really hold.
Lay your hands
because
on
look,
that.
If call it a blackmail, maybe we need to do that with CBN for them to act. Because that is the way we feel when we don't get service as citizens of this country, when they do not act on our behalf to put these people in check. That is what we need to do to get them. And I think people should speak out a lot more. Mm-hmm. A lot of times on the social media, I see people saying, I send this money. You imagine if you have a son somewhere in Kaduna and he wants to come to Lagos and says, oh, please, daddy, send me 5,000 naira. And you send the money and he says, I didn't
get the money.
That has happened to me several times. But what you discover is that, look, the other day I was trying to send money to somebody and they said, this thing has failed. Mm-hmm. And before I knew what was happening.
Was it deducted?
Was deducted, but they later reversed it. Unfortunately, I sent another one and I told the other person, I said, oh, sorry, it was 30,000 naira. I said, please send it back. Thank God the person did not do it, but they later reversed it.
Okay.
Now, the question is this: what if that was all I had?
Right.
What would have happened? So the question is, their infrastructures are not well maintained. It's quite sad, and like I said, the reason for that, we encounter a lot of fraud because they also keep very smart young men that they don't pay well. They treat so shabbily, and that creates a lot of problem for the consumers.
Right.
I'm still waiting for the day the CBN will insist that no bank in this country
should casualize
their workers. If you want to do support services, cleaners and all whatnots and so on, it's understandable.
Right.
But even a cleaner can do a lot of havoc.
Yes, yes.
So, but situation where you have someone holding a very important position who will have access into my account. You heard what the chairman of the EFCC said the other day. That look, for most of all this fraud we're talking about,
there's an insider.
But for goodness sake, you won't blame those young guys.
Well, you're not well paid.
You're not well paid. And you're seeing billions.
Right.
And you see the kind of lifestyle that your MD
is living.
Your top officers. So what do? So that is very, very important, because that's a way, apart from arresting people, apart from you just have to kind of do some preventive measures and make sure that, look, so that our money can be safe. When they pay these people well, yes, their bottom line may be a little thinner, but they will have some comfort. They will be able to assure themselves and confirm that, look, sorry, things will go at least a little well better than it is at the moment.
Okay. Before we allow you go, you did say earlier that one of the other ways by which you think this can also be nipped in the bud is if the customers start looking at other banks. Are the microfinance banks any better?
No, they are not.
Okay. So they are not.
Why did you say that?
No, the question is you pay more there because the microfinance bank also rely on the main banks.
On the commercial banks.
On the commercial banks. So in most cases, and most of the microfinance bank you see are kind of a subsidiary of most of those commercial banks.
Wow.
So it's more or less like the
Yes,
cycle
exactly.
continues. And
I'm not saying all of them.
Right,
But
most of them.
Most of them, yes, exactly.
Most of them.
So, and it's worse for those ones. Because they don't have the kind of the clientele that you have with all the banks. They don't have it. And so anyone they get hold of,
It will suck you dry.
yes, exactly.
Wow.
That's it.
Adebimpe actually cracked a joke earlier. Let's say if you're also sharing that, perhaps we should also begin to patronize the alajos and, you know, the ones that would come to collect your money.
That's risky.
That's risky because that one, no collateral, no NDIC.
No NDIC, no regulatory body.
And the alajo can also jackpot with your money.
Can jackpot. And if he dies, because the question is, look, if you want to give your money to someone to just get across the road there, you want to start praying. Wait, nothing must happen to him or her.
Oh, wow, because
so
that one.
And these days, you know, in those days they use bicycle.
Yes.
For those who do not walk or trek. So you know what happens, particularly in Lagos, yeah. While riding his bicycle, if he gets hit anywhere,
that's the end of your money.
That's the end of your money.
So what are your options, eh?
So weigh your options.
So it's best to remain with the banks.
And when you even keep your cash in your pocket, it becomes more dangerous because those boys on the road.
They will pick your pocket.
So we the only thing is that we talking very seriously. We just should please continue this advocacy.
Right.
We should please not surrender ourselves to this. I hate to use this word I want to use. I call some of them hawks. Talking seriously.
Wow, all right. They are there. You have no choice to do business with them, but we must begin to, again, accelerate our voices on their extortion because, again, that probably is the best word to use here. If you keep extorting your customers. And so we'll continue to also cry out to the CBN to do the needful so that the customers' rights can be duly protected. Thank you so much, Kola Olaitan, for finding time to be with us on the program this morning.
It's a pleasure to be here.
We appreciate your thoughts.
My great pleasure.
Right.
Please, if you don't mind me, please allow me to just congratulate. I'm supposed to be at the investiture of my new president, the new Olaitan president, Aruna Yaya.
Okay.
He's been invested now at Idowu Taylor.
You can still make it, even though today is also your birthday.
President. Oh, yes.
Today is also your birthday, so we celebrate you today as well.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much. It's a pleasure being here.
Okay, so because I'm sure that Mr. Olaitan's president will probably not be seeing this at the moment, but most definitely you'll get to share in that joy. Again, thank you so much for being here, and a happy birthday to you, sir.
Thanks a lot. Thank
you.
All right,
we'll take a quick break. When the conversation returns, Adebimpe will be here with her Lagos conversation.